Now, I'll start with some context. Number one, I'm in my garden shed. That may seem like a weird place to record a video, but it's not weird to me. It's quiet, it's dark, and I'm unlikely to be interrupted. The postman, for example, could arrive anytime now. I get so anxious when the postman arrives. Are they going to knock on the door? If they knock on the door, are they going to want to speak to me? It's just less than ideal. So I thought I'd hide in the garden shed. I also have some light sensitivity, so the fact that it's nice and dark here really helps. And of course wearing glasses helps too. The thing is with the glasses, I may as well tell you, I have a side order of Tourette's with my Asperger, and I get blinky and twitchy, and if I see myself blinking on screen, then that sets me off, and I blink even more. It's like a vicious cycle. I'm wearing a hat because not to look cool, although I may have pulled that off, I don't know, but actually it's because I like the feeling of things on my head. If I don't have something on my head, then I sometimes feel as if I'm not in my body, and that can cause me some anxiety. So when I've got some pressure on my head, it really helps. So of course, imagine going into academia wearing a hat, wearing dark glasses. If people don't get it, they may think it's strange. They may make a joke. They may ask about it, and that's absolutely fine.
Hi, I'm Darren. I have autism, and I'd like to share some thoughts on it from my experiences as an employee across various companies and sectors, including the education sector. Firstly, I don't wish to be presumptuous and state that this is the same for everyone with autism. It won't be. These are purely my thoughts and observations. I've met other people with autism, and there were enough differences among us that I still feel alone. The media would like us to all believe that people with autism are all savants, are highly numerate, have eidetic memories, hack networks, and can tell you how many jelly beans are in a jar just by looking at it. Sadly, I can't do any of that, but I will sort those jelly beans out for you in order of colour using whichever colour format you prefer. At the end of the day, I think that what is good for people with autism is actually good for everybody, especially when dealing with our working environments. So I hope these thoughts are helpful.
Hi, my name is Bill Davis, and I've been asked to say a few words about being autistic in academia. Perhaps the first thing I should say is that I think I'm not that unusual, although I might be the only openly autistic professor you've come across. I think there are quite a few of us lurking in universities. Asperger himself thought that a university might be a good environment for the strange, bright kids he kept finding. Perhaps this is true of me. I entered Salford University as an undergraduate in 1984, and apart from 2 periods totalling 4 years, I've been there ever since. Same things, same environment, same subject. These can be good for autistics. I think being autistic gives me some advantages as an academic, though I'm not sure I'd go as far as my friend Anna Remington when she asks, is autism a gift? Autistic people tend to be good at focusing on something interesting. I feel lucky that my lifelong interest, sound, makes a good academic discipline. I think about it pretty much all the time. In fact, like a lot of autistic people, I was a bit puzzled when I first heard about the concept of flow. Some neurotypical people get excited about flow. It's described as a state in which you're wholly absorbed in your fulfilling task, experiencing almost effortless mastery. You don't notice time passing or the environment around you changing. If you're not autistic, you can pay a coach lots of money to help you learn to achieve this elusive flow state and thereby achieve your life goals. Or if you're autistic, you can reach it every day just by having a good think about one of your strong interests. Perhaps another advantage of my autism is a tendency towards systematising and analytical thought. I tend to see patterns, arrangements, systems, meaning. in places where non-autistic people sometimes don't. An example from my work would be understanding the multi-scale patterns made by sounds in the same environment. Sometimes this helps me bring together two similar things which I think should fit, such as two groups of researchers from completely different disciplines who seem to me to be studying related problems. I find interdisciplinary research fun.
Hi, my name is Graham Hanks, and I'm a final year student doing a BSc in psychology at Sheffield University. 10 years ago, I was diagnosed with autism. Now, being autistic at university can have good sides and bad sides. The good side is that I'm hyperlexic, which means I can read books really fast. And obviously at university, that's always a big advantage to be able to read a lot. It also means that I've got a good eye for detail.
Some more context, a bit of life context. I'll start by saying that I failed at school. I left school with no GCSEs whatsoever. And I was actually kicked out of school. I was termed as a naughty boy and a frequent fighter. And they did not understand my autism. They didn't understand my Tourette's. They just saw me as being disruptive. And the irony is that my signature strength is love of learning. And alongside love of learning, I believe goes a love of teaching, which kind of puts the learning into a full circle context. And yet I failed miserably at school. I have to say, since then, because they don't let just anybody into academia, since then I've collected a couple of master's degrees and working through a PhD. And so I kind of won my place to lecture at various universities. I think that's important just to bear that in mind.
So to some extent, I think science is a good place for people with autism, because I think it attracts the sort of people who are logical thinkers and who perhaps are more what I call Aspie friendly. That is, that they're more aligned with the way that autistic people think and approach problems, and that's sort of been my experience in being in science for many years.
Now, in terms of some of the challenges and some of the positives, I'll start by saying that there are many positives to working in academia. And the first one is that there's usually always a context, and there's a lot of social interaction that is also based on information and context, and that really helps, because non-contextual social interaction can be problematic for many of us.
Being autistic in a neurotypical university does bring problems, of course. Effortless focus means I also have trouble switching attention. I hate being interrupted. I tend to overthink and to put too much work into trivial tasks. Being prevented from finishing something I've started feels very unpleasant. My biggest difficulty, though, is non-verbal communication. Neurotypicals like to say that 80% of speech communication is non-verbal. Not for me, it isn't. I can simulate, of course. I can sometimes maintain appropriate eye contact, verbal prosody, facial expression and body language. To some extent I'm doing it now as I read the script I've written. But I'm doing all of it consciously, all of the time. In fact, in most social interactions, I have a script running in my head. This is exhausting, and I can't do the non-verbal stuff while talking about anything that needs much thought. I struggle to process several people talking at once, and I never know when it's my turn to speak in a meeting. All of this is actually not too much of a problem when I'm lecturing. My problems with non-verbal communication mainly happen outside the classroom. This is partly because universities are increasingly copying business practices and values. Networking skills, an extrovert personality, and an ability to mimic the boss now seem to be important to getting a job, getting research funding, or getting invitations. I think it's a shame that social games, bullshit of all types and mandatory behaviours are becoming so important in the marketised university. It's a shame not just for me, but for universities if they exclude neurodivergent thinkers with this stuff. After all, we're often told that innovation comes from thinking differently about a problem.
The downside is that I become easily overwhelmed, especially when I'm there in person. The sheer number of people wandering around and talking could be quite overwhelming. And when I'm in the lecture, if somebody's talking in the background, I find it very difficult to follow what the lecturer's saying. And the other problem is that the first 2 years on our course, the lectures have been 2 hours long. And for me, that's a problem because after about an hour and a half, my brain gets so overloaded with all the information and tries to concentrate on what the lecturer's saying that my brain starts to shut down. And next thing I know, I'm fast asleep in the lecture hall, which is not because I'm tired, not because I'm bored, but purely because my brain has literally shut itself down. And it's incredibly embarrassing and incredibly frustrating to fall asleep in the middle of just about every lecture. Unfortunately, it's not something that the university themselves could do anything about. So it's just one of the downsides of having 2 hour lectures.
However, there are also problems. So these problems can be environmental. So the lights, the sound of the lights in classrooms, the smells, sometimes the quantity of people and people moving around, clicking things, eating things, all of this can be problematic. So you always have a choice, about setting the rules, when you're running a lecture, and yet you've still got to consider, other people and the fact that academia is an adult learning environment.
I have a lot of difficulties with my autism. Getting through the day can be very tough, but the issue that I think has the biggest and probably most unnecessary impact on my life, and not just my career, is the perception that the hours worked is a direct reflection of effort. Putting a persona on all day and dealing with all the sensory and other issues I endure typically is extremely exhausting and fatiguing. And as soon as it's time to go, I go. I need to go. When things get to me, I need to go. And not just a time out, but go home. The issue is that everywhere I've worked uses time spent as an indicator of how hard someone works. The thing is, as far as I'm concerned, the longer somebody works on achieving a goal, the less efficient they are. And somehow it's also a sign of a lack of commitment, which is woefully untrue. I have worked extra hours when needed. But much of what I do is to actually create the tools to streamline my workflow so that I am always as efficient as I can be, especially on similar or repetitive tasks. I'm an engineer and I can program, so I use that skill to create templates or automate things whatever I can. I can more than hold my own, even when taking into account my necessary absences. In the past, I've been heavily penalised monetarily and in terms of prospects, and it's really unfair. I never blow my own trumpet or try to step on others for something that I want. I wait in line like everybody should do. I don't exhibit the Dunning-Kruger effect that many people do to get ahead. The problem with academia, and I think it's worse in academia, is that it has a process of tendering all prospective jobs that would typically be my only means of promotion to outside, so it becomes a competition with interviews, and interviewers needing immediate proof of knowledge rather than trying to understand how I actually solve problems. This makes it really hard to get anywhere, and I've been held back because on paper just looks like I don't put the hours in. The thing is, all my targets are met, and normally to a higher than expected quality or outcome. I think that really needs to change everywhere.
In terms of academia, I think that's possibly where it becomes a bit more difficult. I've spent most of my career in industry and have been in academia for the last 3 years, and it is a different place, and I think it's less logical to my mind than the corporate world. There's lots of things that are bad about the corporate world, but it is often quite easy to understand what the end game is. In academia, that I find that quite confusing. It's sometimes quite opaque to me, and so it isn't always obvious what the end result is. And so we can sometimes not always be working towards the same end goal, or it can feel like there's conflicting agendas going around, and I find that sometimes difficult to work out, because the way I approach it is that this is the goal, this is what we go for, and to have those kind of hidden agendas from people who have got other plans is difficult.
I think for me, preparation is important. If you know your stuff and you know who's coming to your lecture, and especially if this becomes familiar, same people. They all get to know you. You get to know what to expect, and that's quite important. But when things change, so it could be as simple as you get moved into another classroom because someone's decided that they need to use the one that you're usually in. That can ruin your entire day. It can actually stop you from being able to deliver that particular lecture. And so people need to understand, just changing a location, it might seem trivial, but to many autistic individuals, it won't be.
One thing that's very important to me is to develop my own working area, my workspace, and I need to be able to do things my way, with my choice of tools. I've had some serious run-ins because I've not used the proper spreadsheet, even though it's my tool. Some people have been very offended by my unorthodoxy, and I can be very unorthodox right down to my choice of operating system, but I use the tools I do for a reason, because in the past I've found them to be the most efficient, or they provide some form of comfort. I suppose in a sense it's also an indirect means of expression, right down to the things that I have on my desk or the wallpaper I choose to have on my computer. A lot of companies lock these things down and prevent the very few ways that I can actually express myself. I think it's important to try and understand some of these behaviours, because I think they can actually make sense if you did. I am quirky, I know that. I count steps and I avoid stepping on the edges of paving. I use scripting a lot when I talk to people or announce my intentions. A lot of these are lost on people, especially the ones that aren't of my generation, that perhaps don't know where they come from. But that's just me trying to compensate and fit in. I think the point I want to try and get across is to not force me to change my habits or behaviour. There's a reason for them. I think one trivial example that people find quite strange is that I write notes on a squared paper pad in landscape mode with a fountain pen. The squares actually reduce the glare of the paper because I have an issue with sensory overload, and one of those is visual. The squares also allow me to write in landscape, and it just seems more natural to me. They provide a framework for drawing, to mind map and annotate things to the left and right rather than up and down. And it also fits better on my desk between the edge of the desk and the keyboard. The fountain pen is a sensory comfort. The way it writes, the click of the cap. If I used a biro, I'd probably press so hard it'd go through all the pages. So generally I don't like using any other pen. If it helps me to do my job more efficiently, where's the harm?
It's difficult to talk about this without talking about the way that autism affects you in the workplace generally. And I think it's difficult for people who are neurotypical to understand just how big an impact it actually is on someone. It's not true for everyone. I'm speaking for myself and the people that I know well enough to consider their experiences as well. But for me, it's the exhaustion of having to mask all the time. And one of the things that's really commonly said to me is that you don't seem autistic. I can't believe you're autistic. Are you autistic? It's really common to hear that. And I don't mind. It doesn't offend me because I know people don't mean anything by it. But it's interesting that autism is almost the only condition which is defined in its severity by its impact on other people, not on the person who actually has it. And that's something that I really struggle with, because I know inside my head the difficulties that I face every day, the ableism that I face every day, in the workplace and out of the workplace, and the exhaustion that causes for me, and that increased sort of emotional labour of having to deal with that. It just makes work hard. It makes life hard.
I think by far one of the most triggering things for me personally is within academia and my involvement. I work within autism. It's my area of lived experience and expertise, but also my professional experience and expertise points towards autism. And what I find in academia is that I am predominantly the researched. So the language that's used is such that you get the impression that you're a bit of a research subject. Even some of the language that's used, autism spectrum disorder, can be triggering. The sheer volume of quantitative research as opposed to qualitative participatory research can be slightly triggering. And I think we need to work very hard to include more autistic students at the top. Let's give some places to some autistic students. No, they need to actually be at the top of academia. I think that would be progress.
Finally, I want to say a few words about why I think so few autistic academics are open. About 1.6% of the population is autistic, but I think the incidence is probably higher in academia. Why do these autistics hide? I think it's mainly stigma. It's unusual for people to be openly discriminatory, and I probably wouldn't notice if they were, but mainstream culture does seem autism as extremely negative. There can't be many other protected characteristics where a significant research driver is still eugenics, and the main therapy for kids is teaching them to pretend they're not autistic. Most autism research sees us as wholly negative, unfeeling robots with our extreme male brains, incapable of relating to anyone else. Of course, I'm pretty privileged, and you absolutely should not feel sorry for me. I have what most people think is a pretty cushy job. I'm lucky to work in a department with a tolerant, supportive culture. However, I do hope I might have changed your perception of autism a little.
Another problem I've had is where lectures are pre-recorded and you go to watch them and realise that although there's the option for subtitles, they've not been used. And I'm hard of hearing as well as autistic, and trying to follow a video without subtitles is a nightmare, and it puts people with autism and people who've hard of hearing at a huge disadvantage. Finally, I got so fed up, I complained to the university and said, look, this is not on. You're disadvantaging disabled students. And now they do have subtitles and all their pre-recorded lectures. So things can be done to change, but it's down to you as the autistic individual to flag these things and go to the authorities at the university and say, look, this is putting me and other people at a disadvantage. Can you please do something about it? And you will find a lot of universities will make the effort, if you make the effort, to let them know there's a problem.
I think that there is an argument to change the language around the medicalisation of autism, the term diagnosis, as opposed to identification of autism as a difference, not a deficit, not a disability. The fact that within academia there are many people researching a cure for autism is quite triggering when you're autistic, and you think that somebody wants to cure you of autism. So I think there's a lot of work to do in academia there, and to involve autistic individuals.
Something that would really help is being able to take breaks, as I mean like short month-long breaks or something every couple of years, like a sabbatical I suppose, to allow us to recover from some of that emotional labour of dealing with neurotypical people who make up the vast majority of people we work with all the time, and having to accommodate to the way the neurotypical world is set up and runs. I think I just sometimes need a break from that, and it's really difficult to get. It's one of the reasons I work 4 days a week, but when you reach a certain level in your job, you might have a 4-day-week contract, but the job doesn't go away, so you end up really not being able to do that. That's difficult, that pressure.
As far as some of the positives, because I want to end positively, I absolutely love learning. I love universities. I love libraries. I love books. I would love to, frankly, end up as a nutty professor in a university, where I could hide in the stationery cupboard whenever I felt like it, and yet still contribute massively to to the research and also to the quality of the academic experience for autistic individuals. I do love it. I feel as if I'm exactly where I need to be, and I do feel that progress is being made. I'm currently doing some work with Manchester University around the design of a brand new autism master's course, which will be, I believe, the most participatory and co-produced autism master's course with real practical applied value. So that's exciting. Watch this space on that. And if anybody has any questions that they want to ask of me, then I would be delighted to engage in a discussion.